Nishala is taking a new job, I believe, in Texas. So she will no longer be part of the task force. Kieran in Billings, unfortunately, is having some health issues, which are going to preclude her from continuing on. And then I believe Jacqueline just heard from Shondell. Is that correct, Jacqueline?
Yes, that she was very sorry, but was not able. I don't think she came to any, if maybe one meeting at the most. And she said she's unable to do it. It was just more than she could take on at this time. And she apologized profusely.
But at this point, we will not, be adding new members as we kind of wind down. But just for official sort of business purposes, folks should know that means that our quorum is now 11. We need 11 voting members to move forward with any recommended changes. So just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. But Jacqueline, do you want to go ahead and maybe start with roll and introductions?
Absolutely. Okay. So we're just going to, as before, say our name and our affiliation just for the recording. And I'll call on folks. McCall, good morning.
Good morning. Sorry, it looks like I can't start my video. McCall Flynn, Board of Public Education.
Awesome. Thank you. Curtis.
Curtis Smeby, Northern, also video problems.
I think Virginia can promote you to co-host. Lisa.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Schmidt. I'm a community member.
Thank you for being here. Stevie.
Stevie Schmitz, Rocky Mountain College.
Thank you, Mary.
Mary Ducharme, occupational therapist and assistive technology.
All right. I think those are all of our members. And then we have Virginia with us today. Virginia, do you want to say hello? Tristan won't be with us for a little while. She has another occupation. She's getting married. So.
Good morning, everybody, with the OPI.
And Kirk has just joined. Good morning, Kirk.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to apologize here. I'm to the task force. I'm sorry for being late, first of all, and then secondly, that I'm going to have to jump off the meeting today. I just have to let you know that the atmosphere that's going on and the opening of our schools right now has been supercharged as a result of communities that are taking upon themselves to uprise on the school opening, regardless of what the situation is or the health situation is. And that's having a significant impact upon our administrators in those school districts that are, just working to try to open their school and keep their school open along the way. And so that has created, in my world of work, my very definite need to be there to support administrators that are in those situations, that are working diligently to try to keep our schools open in our community and provide those beginning of the year opportunities to our students. So I know that's a negative comment here, but I apologize to the committee. That's what's going on in the real world out there. And I'll reconnect next week with the work at hand here, because it's oh so important.
Thank you. And we'll be able to keep you up to date with some of the tools we're using and the homework, which you can all see we're really, emphasizing that we work on in between meetings. So thank you, Kirk. And I'm sorry about that.
Yep.
And it looks like we're also going to lose somebody else. Stevie at 9, was that you?
No, it was me.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, McCall. Okay. All right. So I don't think anybody else has joined. So I think we'll just move ahead so we can get through some things here. This morning, we're going to briefly recap the last meeting. I wasn't there, so Zach will remind us of what we did, touch on our purpose and deliverables just to make sure we're on the same page. And then we're going to start by looking at some language recommendation to look at the review by the OPI legal department and make sure that everybody's seen that. They looked at our some of our changes already and have basically passed them along. We're going to look at the CAPE alignment changes that Curtis and others pulled together for the group to examine for today, and look at the results of our survey for subchapter 6 and begin to discuss that subchapter. And that's the bulk of our meeting. Next slide, please. So, oh, go ahead. So I just want to review with everybody. Next slide, yep. We are making language change recommendations to Chapter 58 that will be ultimately submitted to the superintendent and then the Board of Public Ed. Our focus is on students and what's best for students. We have a good process that's been working pretty well for us right now, which includes voting on changes that we have discussed thoroughly. And we're now incorporating some homework in between meetings to make sure that we have all looked carefully at the language in the subchapters. Where possible, we're making changes. We're not rewriting subchapters unnecessarily unless we're creating new language or suggesting that. I think we're doing a pretty good job making sure everybody is speaking and that perspectives are heard, but we want to keep that going. And the deliverables that we will be recommending on to the superintendent include those specific language changes for the subchapters, possibly changing them, deleting them altogether, making recommendations for new language. And also we have the opportunity to provide some broad recommendations for consideration. These might be a little broader than what's in Chapter 58, but they are things the task force feels are priorities that should be considered by the State Department. I think that's it. Zach, anything to add?
No, just want to again highlight, we do have the idea is to have a diverse group of folks from different perspectives. And obviously we do have good representation from across the spectrum. But just to continue to remember that the best change recommendations will happen when all perspectives are heard and considered. So I just wanted to, we haven't kind of touched on that in a while, but as we kind of wind down the stretch here, I thought it would be good just to revisit that and just kind of keep that in our minds that ultimately we're here to hear everybody and to do what's best for students within this process. So thank you again, everybody that's here today for committing to this. Yes.
I just got an email from Allison that she's having trouble getting into the Zoom. So I wondered if I'll resend her the link, but I just wanted everybody to be looking.
Okay.
Nope, she's not an attendee. She said she keeps using the link and she's having some trouble. I'll resend it to her and we'll see if that works, but
I can troubleshoot with her, Jacqueline, also.
okay, great, thank you. Okay, Zach.
Okay, yeah, so just a quick recap from last week. We did have the presentation on the emergency authorization numbers. We did quickly sort of review the changes that Stevie and Curtis and Allison were gracious enough to make to sections 311 through 315 with consideration to CAPE alignment. And I was just going to say, I think the vision was to sort of review, folks could review those over the last week or so, and maybe we could vote on those. I don't know that that will happen today unless we get a few more folks, because I don't believe we have a quorum. But maybe when we get to that point on the agenda, we can discuss that or maybe move on. Because Stevie also sent me some stuff for subchapter 6 last evening that maybe we can talk about. We did ultimately approve the language change recommendation to 312B. And for those that may not have been here, that was really around the placements and trying to give some flexibility for grow your own, while at the same time not tying the hands of EPPs in terms of their placement process. Ultimately, that change recommendation was made with some language that was a little looser and more general. Then I introduced the Chapter 5 subject area review and tracking document. I believe that's up on the Google page. The idea there was for folks to go in and compare what's in the ARM with an identified national standard and Eubank was the one that sort of provided that recommendation, and those national entities that also have standards in those particular areas, with the idea that we could have folks go in and look at those two, compare them, and consider some change recommendations to the ARM to better align what's in the ARM with the national standards in that area. And then we just retouched on the timeline, something I think we'll be doing from here on out, especially as things are a little bit fluid, and we try to wrap up the remainder of the work by the end of September, early October. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing here. And to find it. Bear with me here. Why can't I find it? Okay, everybody see that? So this is, if you recall, some of the first change recommendations that were made by this task force were in 1058-501 general teaching standards. And we had made recommendations to part A, B, G, and I believe L. In addition, we had made some general changes or recommendations to add ESL, Indigenous language endorsements, and American Sign Language endorsement. And so I'll just give folks a moment. So this is what our legal department came back with. I think essentially they didn't alter anything significantly from sort of what was put in the tracker. Jacqueline and I did look at these during our debrief last week, and we didn't see any significant deviations from sort of what we recommended in terms of a major language tweak or anything like that. And if you remember, G was this was language I believe Gary Lucene brought forward to try to address the social emotional learning component and kind of update that. And then B and L were around including the word language to try to strengthen that understanding of tribal and indigenous peoples and students. And I think, and I believe, yeah, A was just sort of differentiated learning. So are there any questions, comments, concerns about any of that? Okay. I think
Zach,
yes.
if you can scroll back up to G there, I think. Yeah, right there. Plan and implement evidence-based instruction, interviews, and extensions that support the diverse academic, social, emotional behavior. Tell me what interviews and extensions kind of mean in that context, because I'm not sure, at least I don't see that.
So, I would presume that that involves that when we say interviews, I don't think that's interviews maybe in the traditional sense that we would be thinking of it. It would be more of a conversation with a student to try to get to, more of the meat of, whatever particular, issues that student may be having, supports they might need, that type of a thing. And then I guess extensions would be just, the different sort of activities, interventions that might be appropriate for that student. That's the way I would interpret that language, but other people can certainly chime in on that.
Lisa has her hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Lisa.
I'm just wondering if maybe we need to define that, because Curtis has a good point, but maybe there are other people who might interpret it differently.
I see Allison's here. Welcome, Allison.
Gary's having a little trouble. I don't think Gary is here yet, but he's trying.
I am working with the chats and trying to email folks who aren't able to enter. I can try and go in and disable the password that it's asking for if that is causing a problem. But I'm wondering, somebody is named Change. Is that Gary? Because okay, I will.
And just a quick point of order. I mean, certainly if the task force decides they want to revisit this language, that is, certainly within their purview. This was, this recommendation for this language was approved. So we would have to go back and, approve any additional change recommendations with this item. Go ahead, Curtis.
Not to be too picky, but if you had plan and implement evidence-based practices that support the diverse, that seems that would get instruction, interviews, and extensions kind of all together under one. And obviously there are a number of practices, and the EPPs could determine what practices or strategies might be appropriate. Just the thought.
Okay, thank you for that. So it looks like Gary and Ann are here. If you can hear me, welcome. Go ahead, Allison.
Thanks, Zach. Yeah, I'm here.
I'm wondering if legal would like to explain the meaning so that we don't try to interpret if they explain the language.
So, Gary, I believe you were the one that brought this recommendation for Part G. Is that correct?
Yes, it was, but it was regarding clarification of social and emotional behavioral needs. I think the language of evidence-based instruction, interviews, and extension was already in the language, so I didn't address that. But I think the comments today are good. So.
Okay. So I guess just to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mary.
Would global citizenship go in that category? I don't know. global citizen, I don't know. You mentioned community context, but just a thought.
Okay. So if I count right, we have 9 folks here. So we do not have a quorum. But just a quick clarification, I don't believe that the legal made any changes in particular regarding that language, other than what was sort of recommended by the task force. So I don't know that they would necessarily be able to provide, specific insight into the selection or the rationale behind that language. It's, I think, speaking for myself, I think practices, I think Curtis, you're correct that if we just said, practices, it would kind of cover all of those, and maybe not be, open for different interpretations. But as of right now, I don't believe we have a quorum to make any further change recommendations.
Maybe we can just record that. I can put that on the tracker that the group would like to consider that and vote on it. Okay, I'll do that.
Okay. Any further questions, comments, concerns on that? Okay. So in that case, I will get out of there. And then I believe our next item is the changes to 311 through 314 that were proposed and shared last week. I'm wondering, sort of in the interest of folks' time today, since we don't have a quorum, we can't necessarily, vote to recommend adoption of that language that aligns with CAPE. We can certainly discuss it more if there's a desire to do that. But I also don't want to spend a lot of time on it if, ultimately people don't have a lot to share or say and we can't vote on it anyway. So I would just at this time open it up for people's thoughts.
Zach, I'm just gonna try to go in and remove that password requirement and see if we do get any more panelists that aren't emailing anybody. So I'll remove it for 5-10 minutes and then get that back on.
Okay, thank you for that, Virginia. I see McCall has her hand up.
Thanks, Zach. I was just going to suggest, since we did talk about subchapter 3 quite a bit last time with the group, that, and since we can't vote on it at this point, maybe we wait to discuss it till there's a point that we can vote on it. And then as this group maybe move on to the 600s or other items that we haven't seen yet.
That sounds good to me. Is there any objection, I guess, strong objection within the task force to that course of action? All right. Seeing none, I guess at this point, I will share what Stevie, let's see, is that the right? This is what Stevie sent me last evening. And I apologize, Stevie, I didn't get a chance to look at this extensively prior to the meeting this morning. But it appears that, again, you were just taking the advanced program standards and maybe looking at how they might align with CAPE. Is that correct?
That is correct. If you want me to walk through this, let me tell you what happens. In the first column, we have the current PEP standards, the middle CAPE as they've been identified. Again, this is just my work. Life interfered with my being able to reach out to colleagues to get this fully vetted, but I have shared with some and continue to do that this week. So I looked at all of the 600s except counseling and psychology and school psychologist, and tried to merge the comments that we see in CAPE with the current PEP standards. You'll see the changes I made in the third column for the recommended revisions. This is a rough document, like I said, hasn't been vetted by all the folks that I've sent it to yet, but I think it gives us a pretty good idea of what we can do. There is a lot of redundancy in chapter 6, and so I've tried to eliminate that where possible. I have not included 1058-312B as we had approved it. I had already gone by that by the time we approved that, so that needs to be inserted. And then you'll see changes in either combining CAPE with current PEPs. A few ambiguous words are removed from the recommendation. As we move down, if you can scroll on down, you'll see this one is exactly the same. There was nothing from CAPE to change. But as we start into the process of combining them, sometimes they got longer. Where they got shorter, it was because I tried to reduce the redundancy. That particularly shows up in the 700s, not the 600s, but this is all the same document. The caveat to all of this is that I have other folks looking at it, have conversations with it to make sure that the programs that are using the advanced standards are aware of what we're talking about and have an opportunity to add their input. In addition, the programs for advanced programs for principal and superintendent preparation use the national standards. In addition to the CAPE advanced standards, we also use the PSELs, Professional Standards for Educational Leaders. I think those need to be infused in some way. And I haven't done that work yet until I came back to the group today. Zach, you do have a handout, a one-pager, and then a more detailed document about those. But I think that's important that they're included. Again, I use the language from PEPs, like we talked about with chapter 3, to keep that pretty uniform. That seemed to work better than what CAPE had. And that really, I think, merges the two of them well. Again, we may have a little bit of mop up to do after other people look at this, but I think we're in a pretty good place with chapter 6. Chapter 7, there was a lot more changes in chapter 7 because of the redundancy, particularly. Oh, if you just hold there for a sec too, where the yellow.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. Finishing with my comment about chapter 7, there's so much redundancy between the principal standards and the superintendent standards. In fact, the superintendent standard starts out by saying that they must meet all of the previous principal standards, but then it goes ahead and lists them all again. So I eliminated those in that standard. You'll see that change. In regards to this, where it's yellow here, if you'll go down to that place, Zach. There. This particular portion of the PEPs, I think, needs some discussion. From my perspective, this is an area that is, it's ambiguous, but it's also really out of our wheelhouse. This is talking about clinical educators, and my understanding is both provider and school-based. We have limited ability to evaluate and impact the retention of the clinical evaluator. I think this is an area that we probably could remove entirely. Although all of the EPPs do support and offer some training to our clinical partners, those that do mentoring for our field work, including student teaching, we really can't measure their impact on retention in ways that I think this language talks about. They're not our employees. We do have a partnership arrangement with them. And it just seems like this is area that we really can't measure because we really can't do very well. So my thought is that there really isn't anything in here that we really need to hold on to. But I think that this language in C is very, very difficult for us to maintain.
Gary's raised his hand.
This is Gary. Thanks, Stevie. That's one question I have as I reviewed this is what the process is for making sure the clinical in-field mentors and educators are held accountable. And I understand that is outside of your wheelhouse. But I thought there was a segment in here at some point where students, the candidates give feedback to the EPPs about their experience. And I'm curious if that would not be a mechanism, or maybe it already is, to where you can evaluate certain clinical instructors, and if they're not doing a good job, then they're not going to be a partner anymore. Is that an option?
That is a part of our process, to be sure. Although we don't evaluate the clinical partner's work, we do evaluate the students' perception of the effectiveness of that experience. And so we have an opportunity to talk about that. I just think the language here is cumbersome for what we're really trying to do. And as we go on, that opportunity to gather input both from employers and from completers is available. And we also, all of us have agreed upon a standardized evaluation that we use for our student teachers, for example. And that does provide us with a look-see in what we're seeing in the preparation piece of student teaching or any kind of field work. And although it's not probably designed to be reflective of the partner, the clinical person who is providing that opportunity, it does give us an insight into whether or not that is a good placement. And although we co-select those with our partners, our P12 partners, we certainly have some opportunity for input on whether or not we're going to use that candidate again. I'm just not sure it has to be in rule. Allison, you had a question too.
Thanks, Stevie. I just say thank you for this. Is a lot of work that you've done. And so I want to thank you on behalf of the task force. And I'm in agreement with what you're saying, and particularly with needing to integrate the P-cell standards. I think that, the more inclusive we can make this document, the better it is going to be for all of us in accreditation. Also, I just wanted to express my agreement with what Stevie's saying regarding the clinical educators. We can do what she says, but we're really relying very much on volunteers for that role, and so it's hard to compel them to do a lot of different things. And so I think we're limited, and I agree that there's a challenge with having this in role.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to things we cannot do, and it complicates our self-studies in that we have little or no evidence to provide here that we've done this, because in fact, it is a loose arrangement from an independent contractor, not an employee that we direct. Any other comments about that particular section? I know you haven't had a chance to digest it all, but those are my thoughts on that particular section. And I'm certainly willing to listen to anybody else's comments. And I do have, like I said, I have ongoing work to do with other folks in other programs to make sure that we're getting a full look at this whole process. Mary, you have a question.
Well, that's the whole problem. Is you're making the clinical educators independent contractors, so then they're not part of the whole school system, and so they're not then related services, and then they're not part of the meetings that go on. They're not part of the after school meetings that go on, because they have to save money with these independent contractors. And then the teachers don't regard the related services as real employees or, real, members of the team. And we need to integrate the education, assistive technology education into the teacher curriculum. And I need to address this at the administrator level, and this is, I guess, the place to address it. you need to look at like RESNA K-12 position paper, and look at that. I mean, if you want to move ahead in the future, we need to provide a better service. It's not, assistive technology is not expert. It should not be an expert focus. It should be integrated into the teacher environment. So that's my spiel. Thanks.
Thanks, Mary.
So Mary, did you have a specific thought about what language might go in here or somewhere else to address that? Like in the ARM itself?
I guess maybe have the administrators look at RESNA, which is Rehab Engineering Society of North America. They have a K-12 group. That's a specific thing, but maybe research or see what's out there, see what's ISTE. That's why I'm giving you resources, because if you look at some of these resources, then you kind of get the idea of what I'm talking about. But wordage, I don't have the wordage right now. I mean, I don't know. Maybe somebody else can help me with that.
All right, thank you, Mary. I think we have, we have two people that have their hand up.
And Eubank from Kari.
Okay.
She's her proxy today.
Good morning, all. Mary, in response to your comments, I completely agree with the substance of your comments. However, this would not be the place to infuse the language about assistive technology. The language about assistive technology or technology in general would be contained in the standards that relate to principal or superintendent or supervisor programs. So this is all about accreditation. And so that would come later in a different section. And I just looked up the national language. And one of the standards for principals, supervisors, and superintendents is promote the effective use of technology in the service of teaching and learning. So I think that encompasses what you're interested in adding, albeit broadly. And then the second thing I'll share is that while I am a huge fan of P20 orientation, meaning that all of the various components of the school systems from pre all the way up to university work together. The fact is that school districts have different rules, and and they're codified in law, and we cannot compel our volunteers who are so gracious in hosting individuals that are preparing to be principals and superintendents in the field. We can't compel them to do a lot of things because they're not our employees. They're the employees of the school district. And so while that creates a challenge, I did want to share that any principal who is or superintendent who is supervising an individual in an internship situation, they agree to do observations, conferences. There's typically a triad where the student, the person in the field that's providing the internship, and a university supervisor assigned to that student. They all meet, they all communicate, and that's an expectation. It's voluntary, and we can't compel our folks in the field to do very much because they're not our employees. I hope that helps, Mary.
Well, I don't know. Something has to be done. I mean, as the whole issue of independent contractor doesn't work very well. need to be part of the team somehow. But
Mary, I think they are part of the team. It's just they're employed by a school district and they're doing this on a voluntary basis. And this is, where we co-construct these mutually beneficial relationships. I can confirm that these folks volunteer to be part of the team. And Stevie can speak to this more because she's an educational leadership expert.
okay, I just wanted to, voice my concerns, and I'm just trying to lead you into the future, and I'm just trying to give you the best way to go about our relationship. And I'm just throwing it out there. So
Mary, I appreciate those comments. And I think you'll see as we go on, or as you have time to look at this closer, and I know you just are getting to see it, all of you today, but we do talk about technology with our principals and supervisors and we do it in rule as well. So you'll see that as we go on. But I think here the complication is that although we have a strong partnership and we couldn't do this work without a strong partnership, we're limited in what we can do about evaluation and retention. And those are the touchy parts of this particular paragraph that I think really confuse the issue more than support it. I think that we have a situation that does work. There is an independent contractor portion to that because of them being employed by the K-12 system or P-12 system and receiving an honorarium from us, not a salary. So while we don't direct their work, we do agree on what their work looks like. And it is part of education return that we have teachers and principals and superintendents who are willing to do this work. They have been in a situation of being students sometime in their career, and they are very willing to give back to help aspiring leaders.
okay, I'll wait for further literature then.
Okay, thanks, Mary.
Mhm.
So we don't have a quorum today, Zach, as you mentioned, and there's a lot of material here to take in. The other thing I want to note is that I haven't gone through and aligned all the numbers and letters to make sure that it flows in the third column as I cut and pasted and rearrange things. So we're going to run into that and we need to change that. So I have further work to do and further meetings with other educational faculty to review and bring their input to you as well. So I suggest we could do that for this next meeting. But Emily, I see you have a question or comment.
Yes, really appreciate all the work here, not necessarily on this, but just wanted to remind the group that when we adopted the new language that Allison and I worked on, that included 606
Right.
as well.
Yep. That's exactly right, Emily. And I had already gone past that when we approved it, but yes, it does need to be put it back in here. And that's a comment I've got to myself. So we did approve both places to have an input, and it's just, you're not going to see it in this copy, but it will go in before we make a final vote.
All right, thank you, Stevie. Let's see. Gary has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Just a procedural question. If I think the work on this alignment is great, Stevie and whoever's working on this, so it's very, very well done. I'm curious, just in the rulemaking process, how frequently are the CAPE standards and these other standards changed? And if those are updated more frequently, then do we need some language in this that allows our standards to change as those other standards change? Or I'm not quite sure how that will work, just so we can keep things aligned in a timely manner.
Gary, that's a great question. Currently, we're about on the same kind of a 7-year schedule. And in fact, Montana and those national standards are aligning pretty closely for review. Although we don't know how often they might do midterm reviews. I think that's a great question. It's something we really need to keep in mind. We do have agreements with CAPE, so we're closely tied to what they're doing and have folks that are monitoring and following along in those processes. I want to talk a little bit about PCEL too, because I think that really gets to your question as well. In addition to the CAPE standards,